The events of Fukushima reinforced that any nuclear accident with public health and safety or environmental consequences of that magnitude is inherently unacceptable. While we focused on the radiological consequences of this event, I believe we cannot ignore the large social and economic consequences such an event poses to any country with a nuclear facility that deals with such a crisis. In Japan, more than 90,000 people remain displaced from their homes and land, with some having little prospect for a return to their previous lifestyle in the foreseeable future. While not easy to characterize, these are significant hardships on these people, and they are inherently unacceptable. So as we look to the future, and we look in a proactive way, we ultimately will have to address the issue of how we deal with nuclear events that lead to significant land contamination and displacement, perhaps permanently, of people from their homes and their livelihoods and their communities.
What you just heard was the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's chairman, Jaczko, saying that the NRC doesn't take into account mass evacuations and people not getting back on their land for centuries when it does a cost-benefit analysis as to whether or not a nuclear plant should be licensed. I'm Arnie Gunderson from Fairwinds, and today I'm at the Regulatory Information Conference put on by the NRC in Washington, D.C. So today, I'm in Washington, D.C. A couple weeks ago, though, I was in Tokyo. And when I was in Tokyo, I took some samples. Now, I didn't look for the highest radiation spot. I just went around with 5 plastic bags, and when I found an area, I just scooped up some dirt and put it in the bag. One of those samples was from a crack in the sidewalk. Another one of those samples was from a children's playground that had been previously decontaminated. Another sample had come from some moss on the side of the road. Another sample came from the roof of an office building that I was at. And the last sample was right across the street from the main judicial center in downtown Tokyo. Well, I brought those samples back, declared them through customs, and sent them to the lab. And the lab determined that all of them would be qualified as radioactive waste here in the United States and would have to be shipped to Texas to be disposed of. Now think about the ramifications for the nation's capital, whether it's Tokyo or the United States. How would you like it if you went to pick your flowers and were kneeling in radioactive waste? That's what's happening in Tokyo now. And I think that's the point that Chairman Jaczko was trying to make. When the Nuclear Regulatory Commission does its cost-benefit analyses now, it doesn't take into account the cost to society if you have to evacuate for generations, or if you have to move 100,000 people, perhaps forever. There's 100 miles between us and about a dozen nuclear power plants here in Washington, D.C. Fukushima was almost 200 miles away from Tokyo. And yet Tokyo soil, in some places, the ones I just happened to find, would qualify as radioactive waste here in the States. How would we feel if our nation's capital were contaminated to that degree? So I agree with Chairman Jaczko. New nukes and old nukes that are being relicensed should include as a cost in their analysis what we've learned to be happening in Tokyo and in Japan. Thank you very much, and I'll keep you informed.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we continue on the issue of nuclear power. On Sunday, tens of thousands of anti-nuclear protesters across the globe took their message to the streets to mark the first anniversary of the earthquake and tsunami at Japan's Fukushima power plant. Greenpeace Hong Kong campaigner Prentice Koo is among those voicing their concerns.
Although no one died right now, but everyone can forecast the impact of Fukushima will last for over a decade or even a century. So for Japan, this kind of well-developed country they can't handle a nuclear disaster. So it's really a strong lesson for everyone to know that when nuclear reactors go wrong, no one can control it.
Will, we are going right now to Burlington, Vermont, to speak with Arnie Gundersen, former nuclear industry senior vice president who's coordinated projects at 70 nuclear power plants around the country. Arnie Gundersen provides independent testimony on nuclear and radiation issues to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and congressional and state legislatures, as well as government agencies and officials in the U.S. and abroad. Now chief engineer at Fairwinds Association, he co-wrote the new Greenpeace report, Lessons from Fukushima. What are these lessons, Arnie Gundersen?
Well, I think the first lesson is that this is a technology that can destroy a nation. I was reading Mikhail Gorbachev's memoirs, and he claims that it was Chernobyl, not perestroika, that destroyed the Soviet Union. And as you look at the transcripts coming out of Japan, we see that the Fukushima accident was on the verge of causing the evacuation of Tokyo. And had the wind been blowing the other way across the island instead of out to sea, Japan would have been cut in half and destroyed as a functional country. So this is a technology where perhaps accidents don't happen every day, but when they do, they can destroy a country. The other things are the cost is astronomical. To fix this is going to be something on the order of $500 billion. All of the money that Japan saved on oil over the 40 years that they've had nuclear plants just got thrown away in the $500 billion recovery effort. And the other piece is the human issues. The health impacts to the Japanese will begin to be felt in several years and out to 30 or 40 years from cancers. And I believe we're going to see as many as a million cancers over the next 30 years because of the Fukushima incident in Japan.
Arnie Gundersen, Fox News host Neil Cavuto spoke with California Republican Congressmember Devin Nunes about what would happen if a tsunami hit a nuclear reactor here in the U.S. I want to go to that clip.
I live close to Diablo Nuclear Power Plant over in the central coast of California, and I've had a lot of questions recently about that. Well, first of all, those reactors are about 100 feet above the sea level. So you would need well over a 100-foot tsunami to even hit those plants. They're actually prepared. They wouldn't have the problem that happened in Japan.
They're prepared.
Arnie Gundersen, your response?
They're not prepared. The tsunami, the myth of the tsunami is that the tsunami destroyed the diesels, and had that not happened, everything would have been fine. What really happened is that the tsunami destroyed the pumps right along the ocean. It doesn't matter that Diablo Canyon plant is up on a hill. The pumps have to be at the ocean because that's where the water is. We call that the loss of the ultimate heat sink. And the Nuclear Regulatory Commission hasn't addressed that in the short-term issues coming out of Fukushima. Without that water, the diesels will overheat, and without that water, it's impossible to cool a nuclear core. So as a country, we haven't addressed this issue of the loss of the ultimate heat sink, and we're kicking that can way down the road, not addressing it for years to come.
Can you talk exactly about the nuclear plants in Japan at Fukushima and the nuclear plants now, because 2 were just approved by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in Georgia, despite the dissenting opinion of the chair of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, who explicitly said, we have not instituted the safeguards needed since the Fukushima disaster.
Well, the plants in Japan were built actually seismically much tougher than this plant in Georgia. If the plant in Georgia were at Fukushima, it would not have survived the earthquake, let alone the tsunami. The industry's line is that the plants in Georgia would withstand an off-site power loss, which may be true. But the bigger problem is because they have an enormous amount of water on the roof, and seismically that makes it tippy, the plants in Georgia could not have survived the incident that began the entire issue. You know, it really boils down to money, though. These plants are something on the order of $20 billion, and it's taxpayer funded because we've got these loan guarantees in place. So basically, us Vermonters